right, well,
go.
thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite, and I've been watching in and out the last day. It's gone really smoothly, so I'm glad to be a part of it. And I am talking to you today about implementing zero trust the Cloudflare way. So my name is Evan Johnson. I manage our product security team at Cloudflare, and there's my email address if you have any questions. Feel free to ask throughout the talk if I'm able to see it or ask at the end. There's my Twitter. You can also DM me questions there. I'm sure I'll be able to see those towards the end of the talk too. And the first thing that you need to know in order to follow along with this talk is what is zero trust. And I actually Googled it about 20 minutes ago because I was thinking to myself, wait, what is zero trust? It's this whole industry buzzword, but actually I didn't really know what it meant. And it actually comes from zero trust networks. And then it kind of made sense to me. The idea is that it's kind of smashing this age-old idea of perimeter security. And that's what the different vendors selling zero trust would like to tell you. But it's also this idea that your network shouldn't be any more privileged than the network at Starbucks or whatever. So it's about deprivileging the default access of the network, this whole old VPN idea. And I think that there's some other new ideas in it as well around just the tooling and the systems that you have in place that mesh more with the way the web works today and the way we use the web today. Because the last 20 years of VPNs have been fine. There's still security breaches and issues with VPNs, but it's this okay technology. But the way the web works today, it's so a little antiquated, and it's really about moving into the future is what zero trust networks are about. So I'll get started. Like I said, product security at Cloudflare and diet soda enthusiast. I actually have a coffee here. You might see me drinking, not diet soda today. But I think one interesting thing to talk about for a moment is that at Cloudflare, we're a security vendor. So there's your warning that we technically are a vendor, and but we're on the security team at a security company. And I actually think that that is a really powerful thing to be on a security team at a security company, because we've tried to situate ourselves as the first and best customer of our own Cloudflare products. So what that means is I linked here to a Stratechery article by Ben Thompson about how Amazon has this idea of their first and best customer being themselves. And we make sure that we are very tight-knit with many of our product managers making our most critical security products, so we can be first in line to use those products, try those products out, to give them feedback on those products. And that's really a powerful thing because one, well, we end up saving a lot of money as a security team because we don't have to use other vendors. We can try to use most of our systems that our engineering team is building to sell. And two, it kind of gets us more involved in that pinwheel of the business. I think a lot of security teams fall into the trap where, how do I say it? They fall into the trap where there's something that the business has because they're supposed to have a security team. And sometimes you'll hear from security people like, I just wish the business cared more about security. And sometimes it's really hard, but the advice I give is your security team needs to be part of your business's pinwheel of success. So I'm sure at your executive team meeting, they've had a conversation about like what drives our business, and your security team needs to be somewhere in there. It shouldn't just be the watchers or something like that. So I definitely recommend reading that article, and it's really critical to to like to share that information that we are a security team at a security company, which means we are dog fooding our own products. And some people say it's drinking your own champagne, but dog fooding is messy, and you're signing up to use a product that is not completely baked. It has a lot of rough edges, and that's the whole point in using it yourself. So, yeah, I guess that's a good intro to what Cloudflare is. We are and our team, Cloudflare itself is a giant network. So we have, this is from January, I think, but we've got points of presence all over the globe. Last January, not next January. Points of presence all over the globe. Some of these blue dots, there's a lot of servers. Some of them, there's a few servers. But on average, these statistics are updated from Q3. Our public statistics, we handle 20 million HTTP requests per second at average time. The peak is higher. 7.5 million, I forgot the million here, DNS requests per second. And we block 76 billion cyber threats each day in Q3 of 2020. So a network of huge scale, very large network. And so it's great that when we provide feedback to our product managers, that feedback can be applied to so many customers and such scale. Okay, so about the Zero Trust. So where did we start? I'm here to tell the whole story arc of Cloudflare and Zero Trust, which is we started as a traditional perimeter security model Cloudflare was founded about 10 years ago. And at that time, that's really the tool that people had. Google came out and they released their BeyondCorp papers a few years after that, which was really influential. But we started with this traditional security model. And that meant we had a VPN in order to access anything. Besides like email and like one other thing, you needed the VPN to access really any internal system that we had. And we had hundreds of them. So hundreds of internal applications, a VPN, and very, very brittle. The security model was not great because the way you control access to internal sites is through IP routes, which anytime something moves IPs, you need to make sure you're updating the routes that people have access to, and that's very brittle. And then in order to do application layer authorization inside of a service, it gets even more complicated because a VPN is at the network level, but you want this sense of authorization at the application level, and just very brittle security model. Not very fun to try to manage. Additionally, usability sucked. So to say it bluntly, there's a funny story where one day we ran out of licenses for our VPN, and so the last person to sign on to the VPN kicked the first person who had signed up off, and just all day, it was just a rotating cast of like, okay, you signed on to the VPN, you got an hour until the person who just got kicked off the VPN signed into the VPN and kicked you off. So it has to go all the way around like a game of telephone until it reached back to you, and then you'd have to sign in. And it was like that until we finally got another license, or however we resolved that. But the usability sucked for other reasons too. We had a no mobile phone policy, so if somebody would get paged in the middle of the night because of some availability incident or some alert firing, and all they want to do is from bed without like looking at their laptop, just look at the metrics, and they couldn't do that. They couldn't go into click in the task tracker to see more information about the alert that was firing or whatever it was, because we had no mobile devices allowed on the VPN. Because when your entire trust boundary is within this network, you have to be very careful about what additional things you're adding to the network. So yeah, that's where we started. And then where did we want to go? So at the time, there was no zero trust. It was it wasn't really a buzzword yet, but we did know that we had to solve this VPN problem, and this is several years ago. I'll give you the full timeline in just a moment. But Google hadn't written the BeyondCorp papers. We wanted our employees to be able to use their phones to access like basic low things that weren't risky for us to put behind something like an identity-aware proxy. And we also wanted better auditing. We wanted better access control. We didn't want to build our own identity provider, but how would we get an identity provider within our network boundary? And then as time went on, we ended up wanting more and more things. Our asks kept getting bigger and bigger. We wanted security keys everywhere. We wanted conditional access controls around if you have the device that we issued you or your mobile phone or whatever. And then we eventually wanted more complicated automated approval processes and all of this automated stuff. We're still adding things to this list of things that we want, and we're still working on them. But it started with like, let's get better auditing, let's get better control over who has access to what, and let's like figure out something for these phones so people can like look at the task tracker from their mobile device. And so the question is, how do you go from point A to point B? And this meme is actually the perfect meme for this. If you've ever seen this episode of SpongeBob, which I sure hope some of you have, they are actually talking about some risk to Bikini Bottom. Search the YouTube video for it. And somebody says in the background, we should build a moat. Somebody says we should lock our doors. These are all perimeter security methods. And Patrick says we should just take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else. And that's exactly the right way to approach this migration and the way we ended up approaching it. So one of the important things that I believe will help you if you try to undertake a transition from like a traditional model to a more BeyondCorp-y, zero trusty model is you're going to make a lot of little changes. And in the episode of SpongeBob, Patrick and all the residents of Bikini Bottom are like literally shoving the town like 1 meter at a time until they get it to a new spot. And that's basically what we did with the company, where we shoved people 1 meter at a time, 3 feet, whatever unit you want to do. And that's how the transition went. So principles of zero trust. I couldn't think of a third one. Thought you need 3 principles, but 2 things to do before you get started. Read the BeyondCorp papers. So Google wrote these papers about BeyondCorp, and you can tell that so many zero trust vendors and people selling this, I'm sure many of people will buy a product or something to help them with this transition at some point. Read the papers first, because you can tell that many vendors have not thought through all of the problems that Google thought through. And the papers are like 2 hours of reading. So there's 6 of them. You can go read them, and some of them are a little mathy, and they like talk about math stuff like sets and all of that. But that stuff's all Greek to me. The papers were still very valuable to read, and for me, I ignored the math stuff, and everything else was great. And then zero trust for whom? This is totally a lie. Zero trust is not Latin for multiple paths. But it's important to note and important to understand that zero trust does not mean like your VPN or your network is ever going away. You can't just ignore this layer of the OSI model. It's always going to be there, whether you're in AWS using a VPC, or for us, we're in a data center with a real physical network and real physical hardware. that you can't just ignore those layers by zero trusting over them. So you really have to think of your employees in groups of people, like a typical role-based access control kind of model. But you have to understand like who is in zero trust in what contexts, and understand that like things are a little more, little less, maybe things are a little less clear cut with zero trust, where the way that we've kind of situated and the way we're going is like, yes, we have one path that's zero trusty and beyond corpy, and like there's all this fancy tech, and then there's another path with a lot of friction, with the traditional VPN, with heavy auditing, with a lot of approvals required, and you're gonna have to talk to somebody after you use it, and that's just the way it'll go, because you can never truly get rid of these other layers, and I think that's an important thing that doesn't get brought up very much. And did I have anything else on the slide? Nope. All right, so starting from the beginning of the story. So the beginning was around 2015 to 2017. I had just joined the company, probably had been at the company at Cloudflare for 3 months at this time. And that we had a company all hands where our, the title of this person now is like SVP of our emergency technology team. He unveiled this, this way to access the task tracker that we had with your phone outside of the VPN. And so what he had done was he had poked a little hole in our VPN and exposed this thing to the outside world, and set up some security between that, but set up some additional layers of security, and basically using this thing that's on GitHub that's now long archived. And he put, I think, 3 sites behind it. And you can go read the code. It's very minimal. It's about 100 lines of Lua. But it's a way of authenticating with your Google G Suite stuff directly with Nginx. So if you're a hardcore Nginx shop like we are, then might be perfect for you. But we use this for some time. And he unveiled this at our all hands. And first of all, everybody was immediately flabbergasted that you could access our task tracker without the VPN. This was incredible. And also our metrics, our internal metrics. People couldn't believe it. And our head of security at the time, he was like, you need to look at this thing tomorrow. Like, this looks risky and scary. And I think all changes in models are very scary. And so rightfully we were concerned about it, and we looked at it. But the kind of model right at that moment, I was like, whoa, this is a big change. So people loved it. And the product manager for this product that we have now in the zero trust space, Sam, he likes to tell the story about paved roads in Texas, around how, like, I don't know if it's true or not, but Sam says that back when they were trying to pave all the roads in Texas, he's a longtime Texas resident, currently not living in Texas though, that to get funding for all the roads, because there's a lot of land, a lot of roads, it's not free, they would just pave 1 mile of roadway. So people would be driving down the highway and on the gravel, they'd hit the paved road, realize that's pretty nice, and then they'd go right back on the gravel. And the next county budget meeting, somebody would be asking for paved road money to pave more roads. And this was very much our paved road. These 3 or 4 services that people used all the time that they didn't need to get on the VPN to use, and they could access from their phone, was a monumental shift. But there's a lot more to do. We still didn't have an IDP. We weren't really sure about this model. We weren't adopting it fully. We weren't really it was just kind of there. A few sites used it, a lot of sites didn't. People had some opinions for it, some people had opinions against it, and it was just like kind of a thing that was there until around 2017 when the product got finished and launched, and it looks very different behind the scenes than just this little Lua program, but eventually the program did get launched. And so this is the beginning stages where it was just kind of an amorphous blob of zero trust. So new beginnings in 2018. So at some point in 2018, Joe Sullivan had joined as our chief security officer, and I had rejoined the company, and we said we really have to do something about identity and access management. These are two really important areas. I think every security team in the world is investing in them, and we ended up coming to the conclusion that we really needed to put ourselves in an uncomfortable position for the long-term success of our IAM program, and really invest in using our own product to do this, in using Cloudflare Access. One, to be a part of the company pinwheel of success, so that we could we had a seat at every table we wanted to, and could help influence different products. And two, because we needed to solve the problem, and we needed engineers, and there's engineers over here on this team that are working on this product. Let's work with them and try to help each other. So in 2018, this image here, you'll see 397 items. I took this screenshot just yesterday or something, and it's just one of the internal sites that we've registered with Cloudflare Access that we use our own product. And we have spent the better part of, since 2018 and beyond, just registering everything internal with this product. We've got tons of things protected by it, and the big shift at this time was definitely this intentional decision to that this would solve our problem. Additionally, at this time, we got a full-fledged IDP. We decided we want security keys everywhere, because phishing is still a very scary attack vector. You can get SolarWinds all you want, but phishing still is very real. And what else? And it was actually a really interesting time, because since BeyondCorp had been like this, and the product had kind of not really been intentionally invested in being used, we would go to meetings with some people at the company, and we would say, we are gonna put everything behind Cloudflare Access. And people would say, well, you can't do that. You can't do that for security reasons. And we would say, yes, we can. We're the security team. And there would be a moment of awkward silence, and then might repeat one or two more times, and then we would end up doing it. So it was a really interesting time. And today we've got not just this 397 things, we've got so much stuff behind Access. It's great. So at this time, additionally, I mentioned the IDP. We invested in that IDP and started wiring up everything to Access. And so then that raises the question of, okay, that was 2 years ago. What happened next? So the future, actually using Access to its fullest and improving the product, and where we are now. So there's 3 areas that are very important to consider. HTTP, which a lot of things are HTTP, especially in 2020 and for the past 5 years or so. SSH and non-HTTP. So SSH in particular is a very important protocol for all engineers everywhere, But there's a lot of other stuff that's not HTTP. Depending on the company you work at, you might use RDP every single day. Also, there's a ton of other protocols that you might want to authenticate, and so it's a tricky one. And then last is endpoint. If you read the BeyondCorp papers, 2 of the 6 papers are like almost completely about endpoints, and not many vendors talk about endpoints when they're talking about zero trust, because it's really hard to do, and I think that it's just easier to ignore it, and so many people have chosen to do that. But there's some talk about endpoints too. So it was. One thing I will add is it was around this time that we started throwing everything behind access, and as we figured things out for HTTP, we made the decision that we also have to start cutting people's access to the old VPN. So as we ramped up support here, we ramped down support there. And this actually worked really well because we found out that like once things were behind this nice paved road, the only people who were still using the VPN were mostly stragglers a lot of times. People who either just hadn't heard the news, hadn't read their email, were just happy doing it the way that they were doing it, and still just using the VPN happily and just didn't know better. So very minimal friction to starting to cut out different groups from the VPN. But yeah, as HTTP support went up, we had to make the decision, okay, we're going to cut the people team here and the recruiting team here and the product team here and the trust safety team here, and it just goes down the list until you get to a much more manageable group with VPN access. So that is a really important thing that was going on throughout all 3 of these. So every single kind of time we could, we would take away access when possible. Okay, so I don't think there's anything left on this slide, and I can start talking about the details. Okay, so first, the details of HTTP. This is actually like straight from our developer docs, and it's the general architecture of the way that our product and our zero trust product works. So you're an internal employee, you're the laptop down here, or a partner or whatever, and you access your corporate application, you type it in your URL bar, and the way our product works, it's extremely simple. It just like forwards you to your identity provider, which could be email, could be like a full-fledged IDP, or it could be like literally you give us an email address and we send you a code, and you type that code in like a Slack magic link or something. We mint you a JWT, JSON Web Token, we stick it in your cookie, and voila, you have access to whatever internal thing you're trying to protect. It's great. One thing I've noticed talking to other companies of ours, depending on the company, depending on your workforce, I think everybody kind of has a different kind of thing going with their workforce. So you could be at a really like large non-tech company. I'll just pick an industry, oil and gas. Oil and gas have a ton of people in their workforces. And if you look around, I'm going to guess they have like 6 different identity providers and all sorts of contractors, different types of employees, very complicated IT setups. That is okay, and I think that actually lends itself really well to this mantra and feeling of baby steps and pushing things 3 feet at a time, because I think people in that situation have to develop a strategy for themselves, whatever they think their best technical strategy is, and nudge people towards that in the right direction. And so, in some ways, this was really easy for us. This part of the migration of adopting HTTP everywhere HTTP's zero trust everywhere was really, really easy for us because our identity provider was new. We actually moved identity providers recently. We moved from like just using G Suite to a real IDP, and that was pretty painless. But I think your mileage may vary if you're a very complex setup or you have tens of thousands of employees. Early on in this, we talked to a CISO at another tech company, and they had like tens of thousands of contractors working, and they used a completely separate IDP and had access to all this separate stuff. And so they really had two separate identity and access management stacks, one for their technical employees and like the employees of their company, and then one for all these contractors who were technically not part of their company. And that makes sense as a strategy for them, but your mileage may vary, and everything's going to be different. Every company is going to be different. So no strategy fits all. You'll also notice endpoint protection providers. I don't have much to say about this, but the endpoint is very important in zero trust, the zero trust model. I think it's just as important in the traditional perimeter security model, because if it's an endpoint accessing your sensitive stuff, like it really doesn't matter what protocol it's over. The thing that matters is that the endpoint is secure. So so a lot of there's some integrations with these third parties, and you can get metrics and whatnot from the endpoint, and that's helpful. So over HTTP, this redirect, this is implemented as a real redirect, and you can do like SAML and whatnot, but for example, we use OAuth integration with Cloudflare Access and our identity provider. It's an OAuth 2 integration, so we can still like say this group has access to this and this group has access to this, and those groups are actually groups of employees based on where they are in the organization, the people team, the recruiting team, whatever. And in that OAuth flow, one big question we had is, okay, how do we actually support security keys? Because we had some specific requirements around identity providers and how our security keys are enforced there. We really wanted WebAuthn, so we could be really robust against phishing. But like, it's not so straightforward how to fit it in there, because this product, while great, it doesn't have a record of every employee who exists at our company. This product does, but there are some, the IDP actually does, but it doesn't have there are some requirements where it's sometimes you need another second factor type that's not a WebAuthn security key. So it gets messy if these IDP providers don't have like really robust, expressive ways to say, okay, if you're accessing this, you need a security key. If you're accessing this, you can use TOTP or something else. So it's actually kind of a difficult problem. And the way we ended up solving that was, this is a real assertion. This is the meat inside of a JWT token that I received yesterday from our IDP. And you'll see this AMR. If you Google AMR, it means authentication method references in OAuth 2. If you Google that, you can find that there's actually a way to see when somebody authenticates in an IDP and you receive a signal that they authenticated. Inside that JWT, you can see the way that they authenticated. So SWK is software key. MFA means multi-factor was on. OTP is one-time OTP. I'm not sure if they're referring to TOTP. There's a whole dictionary of what everything that can be an AMR means. There's an HWK for hardware key and PWD password. So you can actually get information about the way people authenticated. And using this, we're able to implement a feature that says, okay, when you authenticate into Cloudflare Access, we want to make sure that you authenticated with an AMR that indicates you used a security key. And so we actually did that. We did that July, if you remember the Twitter hack that was everywhere. We did that in July, and somewhere around here, and we saw usage of WebAuthn just absolutely explode overnight. Just so we that feature ended up being a huge success, and it helped us kind of achieve this security key everywhere goal. We're still not exactly there. We still have a little bit a ways to go, but we are well on our way to enforcing security key almost across the board. If you are, it is a big challenge though, because the world is not ready for security key, and we're really on the bleeding edge of it. Looks like I have about 7 minutes left, so I'll make sure to go a little fast to make sure we have time for questions. Okay, so SSH, this is the big one. This is a really challenging one. I could give a whole talk on just SSH access, but okay, Cloudflare access, it works over HTTP. Cloudflare, you probably know, so for HTTP. But how do you get a laptop to connect to your network to SSH to something which is on port 22, it's not port 80 or port 443, and integrate with your IDP and all of this stuff that is existing? How do you control access with your IDP? And the answer is not simple. So what are these red boxes here? These red boxes are where, well, it's half the diagram. So it's a little, the red boxes aren't great, but it shows where we have a special client helping us with the connection to make this smoothly and fix the integration so that it's something that works out of the box with our identity providers. So between our corporate apps and our servers, we actually run this thing called Cloudflare D. You can Google it. It's I think much of it is open source. I'm not sure it all is, but it creates a tunnel from our server back to our edge. And when people SSH, they also use Cloudflare D. It creates a similar tunnel to the edge, and it allows them to connect, this is crazy, over HTTP, SSH over HTTP too, with a HTTP full duplex, like it's almost like a WebSocket. I'm not sure if it is a WebSocket today, but it very well could be. The actual details of like how that connection works under the hood, I'm not privy to. But the way it works, you can actually see, this is Cloudflare D, it's an open source project. You can go search it on GitHub. But this is quite a diagram, but you'll notice here in the bottom left, once this thing goes away, you'll see it says, this is from an SSH config. It may be difficult to see, but you can use this proxy command to actually pipe your connection over a connection that Cloudflare D establishes. So we can use this for two things. One, if you just want to SSH over HTTP to your server. But two, we actually built a feature to do short-lived access with SSH certificates. So if you're familiar with Netflix's Bless, it's the exact same thing, where we have a website that, maybe it's not the exact same thing, but it's the same idea, where we have a site that you connect to get your SSH, you get your public key turned into a certificate, an SSH certificate that you can then use to connect to your server. So we have a feature that we built to enable this short-lived access, so that we literally create an SSH certificate authority for you. You can put the public key in your SSH config, and then with your IDP, you can connect to the with your IDP, you can connect to our edge, get a certificate signed, present that, and then do it all over this HTTP. It's called an Argo tunnel, this HTTP SSH connection. The actual like tunnel under the hood is called an Argo tunnel. But you can pipe your SSH connection completely through that. And the result is you basically turn our edge into a jump host. So I like the name Cloudflare Jump for jump host, but it didn't make it past the drawing board. And it's not just SSH. You can pipe any like TCP over this tunnel that we have, and it's kind of magical because since it's HTTP, you just kind of attach your normal cookie header, and then your connections can go to wherever the tunnel on the other side leads. So little complicated to get started, kind of a lot of learning with the SSH certificates, but it is something that we have available. And then last, the endpoint. So this is the final frontier of zero trust, where no vendor has gone before. And we have one of the things that we're trying to do internally for our own security is to connect this Warp. If you're familiar with our product Warp, it is a WireGuard VPN. It's a WireGuard connection between your phone or your MacBook to our edge. And so it's a WireGuard tunnel, which does full packet encapsulation. The way WireGuard works, they just take your IP packet, package it in a UDP packet or frame or whatever it's called, and send it to our edge, which we can then decrypt that UDP packet, take out the IP packet, handle it. When you connect, the way we know that you are a Warp Premium customer or whatever, you present a public key, and we have those public keys mapped to like whether or not you're a premium customer or not. But we could also map that to an identity or a name, and then we could build out some really expressive policies based on if you're connecting from Warp, if you're connecting from your MacBook, and if we've seen this public key and you have your private key that we expect. It's kind of a new idea that we're exploring, and it's a little bit reinventing the wheel-ish, because we've kind of gone full circle where we end up protecting the network again. And it's really just about extending. And so I was kind of like deep in thought about this one day, and it ended up, we just kind of rebuilt something to be much better, to work the way web apps work today, is the way a lot of this is going. And I thought that was interesting. But there's still a lot more work to do to actually get there. So that's something I've been thinking about recently, and ways to integrate with the network better. But one of the big benefits of using WireGuard for this is you don't need all this crazy client on this side, Cloudflare D business. It encapsulates the entire network traffic. So you could just type in SSH, and it would just work because of the way WireGuard works. All your traffic over that tunnel will just arrive at the destination encrypted. So yeah, that's what we're thinking about soon for the endpoint. So I'm out of time, but my takeaways about zero trust: baby steps. Zero trust is a gradient. Keep moving forward and keep getting wins. So think about your employees in terms of populations and groups of employees, and think, how are we going to make this population more secure? How are we going to make this population more secure? Zero trust is more than identity-aware proxy. So A lot of people just slap an IAP in there and they're like, yep, we're zero trust. If that's what you want, you could check out the bit.ly OAuth2 proxy, and it's good enough. So last, don't neglect the endpoint. Don't neglect non-HTTP. So it's really easy. I think it's really easy to use your IAP, but endpoint and non-HTTP traffic is when this stuff gets actually very complicated. And with that, that's all I had for you. So I really appreciate listening, you all listening, and I'm curious if anybody has questions.
Hey, I'm going to bring back some, as we wait for folks to ask questions, bring some of the other
Sorry, I went a little over time there.
Oh, no worries. No worries. It was a great talk. Thank you. In fact, no, thank you. We really appreciate you giving that talk. So, yeah, we'll just wait, I guess, for a few seconds here. David, Abdullah, anything you wanted to ask or bring up?
Yeah, so from a organization perspective, do you think that there's kind of a range for an organizational, like size-wise, that would benefit from zero trust, or would it be that, or the org is too small to benefit from implementing something like zero trust?
Yeah, I think like when you're really, really small, I've been at really, really small companies. You don't really have this problem because everyone really has access to everything, despite what they might say on their vendor security questionnaires. Their internal controls are usually not great, and it's like every person at that company has like 20 jobs. So good luck if trying to get those really tight controls. At a big company, I think there's no company too big for it, but I do think you have to break it down into like smaller end companies. So let's start with this business unit. Let's start with this other business unit, and try to work your way there by breaking down the problem. Because if it's not really a binary thing, you can't just like turn on the zero trust light and turn off the VPN.
All right. Dave or Brian, did you guys have anything?
I do appreciate like just telling the story of what you've gone through. That's always fascinating to me, is like, this is what we encountered, and it's a real story. Like, it's not a bunch of theory. It's like, I know we've encountered this. This is the good thing that happened. These are the struggles we had, and I love those stories.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's what I was going for. It's several years of what's next, and we're slowly getting there. And the security key only thing is the thing that I'm most excited about for January of 2021.